going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Before we get into items 26 and 27 and 28, I wanted to make one acknowledgement. One of the speakers earlier this morning made reference to my health, and I just want to acknowledge that a year and almost a year and a half ago now, I had some vocal cord surgery, which has impeded my ability to project my voice as much as I would like to, but certainly otherwise I'm in good health. About 2 weeks ago, I went in for a procedure to try to beef up the one side of the vocal cord that I had a growth removed from. And during that time, they discovered a second small growth that they were going to start treating with radiation. And that procedure is actually going to start today at 4:30. So I'm going to be leaving this meeting at 3:45. I hope to be able to vote on as many of these items, hopefully all of them, before I leave. But I did want to make that acknowledgement. Vice Chair Desmond will be taking over the meeting at about 3:45 and continuing on for the balance of the agenda. So with that, we'll start with item number 26, which is a board letter brought forward by Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, a better way to respond to behavioral health crises, countywide mobile crisis response teams. And I'll ask Supervisor Fletcher if he would like to make some introductory comments.
Thank you, Supervisor Cox. What we have in front of us are three complementary reform measures that we've brought forward after weeks of consultation with community leaders, with organizations, within folks throughout San Diego County, to arrive at what I believe is a powerful step forward for us as a county to take to acknowledge the very real concerns of the community. Certainly at the end of May, in the aftermath of the murder of Mr. Floyd, we saw tremendous protests, the likes of which we have not seen certainly in my lifetime. But it wasn't just about that one isolated incident. The cries from the community were for us to substantively and seriously address and take to heart the systematic racism that's been prevalent in our country for hundreds of years. And the community has demanded that we reevaluate and re-look at everything that we do in a new light, with an eye towards equity, with an eye towards racial justice, with an eye towards tackling inequities. And so after weeks and weeks of meetings, we've come forward with three proposals that I believe, again, are a positive step forward that our county can take to be on the path to a more perfect union, to recognize that the demands of the community are real and that we have it within our power to address their concerns. We have it within our power to make our county a better place, and we have it within our power today to show a clear signal that we're willing to take this positive step forward. The first item that we will consider is around mobile crisis response teams. The historic lack of mental health services throughout the United States has frankly resulted in law enforcement officers having to serve as first responders to almost all behavioral health crisis issues. If it is a violent situation or the individual is a danger to themselves or someone else, then of course it would have to be law enforcement that responds. But the reality is law enforcement is really the only crisis response available for individuals who are experiencing mental health or substance use crisis. The reality is trained clinicians who do this as their profession, as their job, would be much better ones to respond. This idea is not new. It's certainly been around for a long time. Many states have longstanding networks of mobile crisis response teams. The state of New York, Texas, Michigan have all adopted these policies, and we can learn a great deal from what they've done in terms of our implementation. Here in California, many counties are ahead of us as well. Los Angeles, Contra Costa, Ventura have all moved forward with similar type proposals and ideas. Mobile crisis response teams are also used in a strategy in multiple other countries, both Australia, Canada, and others. And there have been countless studies that cite the effective outcomes of mobile crisis response teams in reducing hospitalizations and increasing connections to services. Here in our own county, we've certainly expended considerable energy and effort around this issue and around beginning the steps to move forward to this. I want to recognize District Attorney Summer Steffen for her leadership on the issue of mobile crisis response teams and creating a strategy to improve criminal justice response to individuals with mental illness. In her blueprint for mental health reform, a strategic new approach addressing the intersection of mental health, homelessness, and criminal justice that she put out in February of last year, she outlined a number of strategies with mobile crisis response teams, and in part being a foundation of a better way to address this crisis. I know Supervisor Jacob has been a champion of this issue and actually mentioned it in her State of the County speech as something that our county needs to adopt. And as a board of supervisors, we unanimously approved well over a year ago a pilot program to try out this concept in North County. Due to unforeseen circumstances with citing a location for a community-based crisis stabilization center, the implementation 12 months later continues to be delayed. And so what we are bringing forward here today is an idea long championed by so many people in so many counties, in so many countries, in so many states, with members of our own board in support of it. But what we bring forward today is not to just try it out, but to adopt it. We know that it works. The evidence supports it. A recent study showed that people with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to lose their life during a police encounter than civilians approached or stopped by law enforcement. And I think this is a testament to the reality that we're asking law enforcement to do something that is not their job. And if we can have trained clinicians who have the training, the expertise, the time, the patience, I think that we can get a much better outcome. We also know in 2018, throughout San Diego County, law enforcement responded to over 54,000 mental health related calls. That's 150 calls a day throughout our region. We've done great work as a county in significantly increasing our psychiatric emergency response teams, and those still play a role, because if the call involves a crime or a violent individual, then it would be law enforcement with a PERT clinician who would respond. But we need to have a different option for those situations where it is appropriate. And that is what we are bringing forward today, is the ability to have mobile crisis response teams that are detached from law enforcement that can respond most appropriately. And we have the opportunity today to move forward in this regard. Now, it will be a lot of work. It is have to set up workforce, you have to set up procedures and protocols. We have to work to create an alternate number that people can call for a non-emergency response where one of these teams could be deployed. We have to work with our 911 dispatchers about how they might be able to screen calls that would be more appropriate for these, and work with law enforcement in the event they secure a situation and secure a scene, they can then call to divert these. And so there are multiple avenues and approaches by which we can begin to get these deployed. But today we are voting on a recommendation to take the necessary steps to expedite the implementation of county-wide mobile crisis response times, to create a helpline utilizing existing access or crisis line, or perhaps working with 211 if possible, to allow the community to request a mobile crisis outreach team when needed, launch an outreach campaign to educate the community about mobile crisis outreach teams, and make changes to the Health and Human Services budget to fund countywide mobile crisis response teams. I would add a fifth recommendation, to have our District Attorney, Summer Stephan, involved in the development of this program. Given her history and work with this issue, we certainly want to make sure her perspective is heard and engaged and at the table, along with Dr. Bergman and our Health and Human Services team that would be deploying this throughout our region. And again, this is an opportunity for us to take a step forward in investing in our resources in ways that will get better outcomes, that will de-escalate situations, and then will provide individuals the access to the most appropriate level of care they need. And I request my colleagues' support for this item. And I believe District Attorney Summer Stephan is here and would like to speak as well, Mr. Chair.
That's my understanding. And if we could call up our District Attorney Summer Stephan for her comments.
Thank you. It's good afternoon, Chairman Cox, Supervisors, CAO, and Board. It's an honor to virtually join you. And thank you, Supervisor Fletcher, for this opportunity to speak about the value of mobile crisis response teams for our region. As DA and joining with law enforcement, one of the biggest challenges is the clear intersection between mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness in our region. It's a challenge that's being faced around the country. And the question that needed solutions was posed at a 200 stakeholder forum that work together, including the sheriff and law enforcement at the table, leaders from NAMI, our mental health systems, all working hand in hand for the service of our community. And we are discussing an important item today, but it is in combination with the continuum of care that provided places where people with mental health issues can be taken, the expansion of our substance abuse. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank each supervisor who has worked diligently on this issue, because the goal is to provide compassionate treatment to those with mental health issues and with substance abuse, but to also keep our region safe. And that is the struggle. 54,000 calls did come in involving mental health last year, and looking at those calls and trying to categorize them, some of them absolutely will continue to require a response by law enforcement. However, there is a high statistical number where law enforcement is called because we have no other alternative. It is mothers with sons that have stopped taking their medication, that can't get their sons to take their medication. It is people that don't know where to turn for help, that need another voice to calm down the situation. It is suicide calls that leave officers with very few options when they show up. Our region created one of a kind that has been a model PERT system, the psychiatric response system, but at times they're not able to respond all the time, and sometimes it's not safe for them to go into a situation until police are there. Thus, they responded to 10,000 out of the 54,000 calls that law enforcement had to respond to. This has been a work in progress as reflected by board actions on March 26, brought by then Chairwoman Diane Jacob, and June 25th, where an implementation was moved and voted by all of the supervisors to begin a pilot in conjunction with all of the other solutions. I'm happy to report that Luke Bergman, our office with the sheriff, working with dispatch, working with the mental health systems and community, have much of this work well on its way to benefit our community. And as always, sometimes starting with a pilot is a good idea, and it was on June 26. But of course, the goal and the vision is for every member of our community, wherever they are, to receive this benefit of enhanced systems that are expert in supporting mental health, substance abuse crisis in the best way possible, in a tiered approach that's balanced and smart, that reflects the needs of the individual and their family and the safety of the community. So that tiered system would involve that evaluation, whether it's by dispatch, 211, or the access hotline, of whether this is a police response with PERT, whether this is a community clinical behavioral response, or whether this is a supportive after call follow-up connecting families with services. I know that we can do this, and I know that there is the commitment already by the county and the support of law enforcement on this item. Like Supervisor Fletcher noted, police officers are put in situations that are often untenable, where a psychology degree is required versus a law enforcement academy. And so I view this as an item that is supportive of community, of law enforcement, and of our vulnerable mental health population. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for putting this item forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Stefan. And I believe now we have 28 speakers that wish to speak on this item. So I'll ask the clerk to go ahead and start calling.
Thank you, Mr.
and
Chairman.
their names. We would ask you to keep your comments within 2 minutes, and go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any members of the public that wish to speak on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you, and you will be muted until it is your turn to speak. I will note that we have received 217 e-comments on this item. We'll be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number, and you'll hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the record, and you will have 2 minutes to address the board, as the chairman noted. You will hear this sound when your time is up, so please conclude your comments when you hear that tone. I would remind the public speakers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. Erin, can you please call the first
Yes,
speaker?
thank you. Our first speaker is 0024.
This is Linda Mims. I'm a serious mental illness advocate and a member of the California Advocate Group, SARDA, and NSSC. I vote an emphatic yes on Supervisor Fletcher's call to establish countywide mobile crisis response teams. Most people in serious mental illness crises need medical help, not police intervention. Dr. Henry Nasrallah likens psychosis to a brain attack, needing immediate treatment like a stroke for best outcomes. These are treatable medical diseases and should not be criminalized. For mobile crisis teams to be effective, they must have the authority to issue 5150s and include a solid safety net to services after hospital release. Over 50% of the sickest people experience psychosis, suffer cognitive impairments, rendering them unable to recognize their illness. Compromised decision-making capacity makes it essential that they receive involuntary, compassionate care. California's overly stringent involuntary treatment criteria under the LPS Act is the biggest reason families cannot get the care needed for their loved ones before they deteriorate to the equivalent of a stage 4 cancer and must call 911. No other disease is treated this way. Lack of accountability with consequences must be examined at each level on the care continuum. Currently, our hospitals and doctors release undertreated sick people back to the street with no warm handoff into supervised services. Our AOT program under Laura's Law needs review as it is being sorely underutilized due to program demands that are too difficult to meet. Nevada County is an example of a very successful, cost-effective program that saves money and gives people a chance to thrive. I urge the board to issue a resolution to apply for the IMD, Institutions for Mental Disease, Section 1115 waiver for serious mental illness to Governor Newsom. The current discriminatory federal rule prohibits federal Medicaid reimbursement to states for adults with serious mental illness patients in a treatment facility with more than 16 beds. Obtaining a waiver can bring more treatment beds into our state and county. Please contact my friend John Snook at the Treatment Advocacy Center for further information on AOT and the IMD exclusion. And thank you so much, Board of Supervisors and Summer Stefan, for everything you're doing to try to improve our continuum of care for people that need it the most and can't speak for themselves. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 0423.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Clark, and I am a longtime County of San Diego resident. And my comments come from the officer-involved shooting review that was done of 20 years. It was dated August 19th, done by the District Attorney's Office. Between 1993 and 2017, 439 officer-involved shootings in which 41 subjects shot, 55% were fatal. Drugs and mental health issues were very common in the subjects. Either some evidence of drug use or mental health concerns was present in 348 out of 439 cases, or 79% of those cases. So it's very important and very timely that we do have this mobile response team established, and to even look at the way PERT is doing things, because PERT is not perfect. District Attorney Stephan just basically admitted to that they were not able to respond to all of the calls. And then sometimes the way they responded to those calls were not satisfactory or compassionate to the families. So needs to be a whole overview and a intersection of between PERT and this new mobile response team, so that people who have mental crisis issues and law enforcement is called out can have more positive outcomes and they can receive treatment or help as necessary rather than end up in a fatal shooting. And so I'm happy to see this as part of a moving forward and a new initiative. And I hope that the board is able to agree on it and get it passed. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 2983.
Hello, my name is Lisa Vincent, and I'm a representative of Showing Up for Racial Justice, North County, San Diego. SURGE North County is part of a national network that educates and organizes and mobilizes white people to fight racism. Our organization urges you to vote yes on agenda item 26 to implement a countywide mobile crisis response team. Coming from personal experience, I was part of a program in Phoenix, Arizona known as the Community Assistance Program, or CR program, that has a successful model already implemented. There's also a program in Eugene, Oregon known as the CAHOOTS program, Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. These programs alleviate the need for law enforcement as well as the fire department to respond to mental health crises. By freeing up law enforcement and fire departments from being forced to act as social workers, there's an overall reduction in call volume, which allows them to be available to respond to fire, medical, and actual law enforcement emergencies. Again, my name is Lisa Vincent. I'm with Showing Up for Racial Justice, North County, San Diego, and I urge you to vote yes on agenda item number 26. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 3640.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Cox, board members, and CAO Helen Robbins-Myers. My name is David Garcias. I am president of SEIU Local 221, and I'm proud to represent more than 10,000 County of San Diego employees. We support taking law enforcement out of the county's response to mental health calls. As a former law enforcement officer myself, I recognize we need trained clinicians to respond to mental health issues. Too many public agencies, including the County of San Diego, overspend on policing and incarceration of our community members suffering from mental health challenges. We need a compassionate response to these incidents. Police are not equipped to handle mental health crises. Among other problems, the current practice leads to millions in taxpayer dollars spent on legal bills for excessive use of force. And we all know that pulls resources away from critical public services. We need to invest in the needs of our community and invest in San Diego families. Let's end the unfair burden we have put on law enforcement and the dangerous situation we have created for those struggling with mental health challenges. Please vote to stop the practice of treating mental health as a law enforcement matter. I speak in favor of the motion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 4716.
Good afternoon. My name is Molly Woods-Drake. I'm a resident of Encinitas. First, I want to thank Supervisor Fletcher for Proposal 26, 27, 28. I'm one of the founders of Encinitas for Equality, as well as the union rep for SEIU UHW at Tri-City Medical Center. I'm calling to urge all of the board members to vote yes on each of Supervisor Fletcher's 3 proposals. As both a union rep at a hospital where we are currently working in partnership with the county to build a new BHU, as well as the citizen heavily involved in the mental health and recovery community, I understand the extreme importance of developing and putting into immediate effect countywide mobile response teams to better serve all our communities. In my experience with mental health issues and addiction-related calls, our white communities receive a very different experience with policing as opposed to Black communities. White citizens who are experiencing mental health concerns, drunk in public, or suffering from overdose related to addiction are far more likely to end up in emergency rooms, behavioral health units, and rehab facilities, whereas our communities of color are more likely to end up in police custody, imprisoned, and either brutalized or worse, killed. This was exhibited in Carlsbad a week ago when a Black man under the influence was tasered and had his head smashed into cement by police.
My recent conversations with local police confirm they do not feel equipped to handle the onslaught of mental health calls our county faces, nor are they qualified. As a leader in my community with the Movement for Black Lives, I urge everyone to vote yes on this proposal, as well as Supervisor Fletcher's two other proposals. But specifically to Supervisor Gaspar, your district, which is made up of primarily white coastal San Diego, has held protests, vigils, and actions nearly every day since the murder of George Floyd. We stand in unity with our Black communities and demand you to do the same by voting yes today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5700.
Hi, my name is Wei Zhang, and I'm the Director Advocacy for We the People. I'm calling in to speak to support the item number 26. I want to thank you, Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, for steering this effort and present it to the board for a vote. I'm super uncomfortable with the fact that the police constantly being tasked to do the work that could have been better serviced by the folks, by the mental health experts that could have been dealing with it a lot better. Basically, when we having the police just going out and constantly subject themselves, brutalize the homelessness and the homeless folks, as well as the racial issue that often leading to serious liability for the county. So I urge you to vote for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6058.
Hello, my name is Daniel Beeman, and I ask you to vote yes as one taken by SPDD and a PERT member to USD on Friday, 6/12, for a called in 5150. I spent over 4 hours there in boxer shorts taken via the SDPD SUV in handcuffs. The doctor said, you are good to go. That was 4 hours later. I, Mr. Beeman, I was in flip-flops, no wallet, and have a $238 bill still remaining because insurance only covered 45%. Vote yes on item 26. We can save lots of money, lots of time, and really get the work done the right way. Thank you. Please vote yes on item 26, 27, 28. Thank you very much, Supervisor Fletcher.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6249.
Hi, my name is Max Salcedo, and I'm a resident of San Diego. I ask the Board of Supervisors to continue to educate themselves on these issues and to support positive programs like the mobile crisis response teams. We should not be sending police to situations with mental health crisis. However, I should also add that I believe funding should be increased for these programs because based on the initial assessment, I saw that there was only a $10 million amount that was added initially. Because of that, I question the performative nature of this action. We need real money and commitment if this is going to work, not just something that is being trotted out because of current events. As an important note, on San Diego County's own website, the recommended budget by department for fiscal year 2019-2020 called for a recommendation of $957.2 million to the San Diego Sheriff's Office. I'm concerned that the current actions to reprioritize the funds of this county away from law enforcement, which disproportionately affect Black populations and people of color in a negative way, amounts to a poor attempt to rectify the historical wrongs against these communities. I encourage you to continue to listen to your Black communities and your communities of color. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 7731.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Thill with Encinitas for Equality. I urge you to vote yes on 26, 27, and 28, but I'll speak directly to agenda number 26. Working as a psychiatric nurse for the past 10 years in San Diego, it continues to shock me daily the lack of support and resources for those suffering with mental illness in our county, more specifically for people of color. Day after day, I witness the misunderstanding and mistreatment of mental health patients at the hands of the sheriff and police department, more specifically when PERT has not been incorporated, and often they are not. Lack of knowledge regarding mental health intervention often leads to an escalation of behaviors. If you think about it, it's common sense. Would you send a plumber to an electrical emergency, a dentist to a cardiac emergency? No. So why are we sending untrained personnel to mental health crises in our community, where the majority of the time they end up unnecessarily incarcerated with minimal psychiatric support and either detained for an unreasonable amount of time or put back out into the same situation on the streets, or even worse, killed. With the recent closure of mental health facilities in San Diego County and the continued lack of funding and resources geared towards supporting those with mental illness, we are failing the people of our county daily. Number 26 will provide a proper channel for those experiencing a behavioral health crisis to seek appropriate resources and care. A resounding amount of research supports that early identification and intervention regarding behavioral health crises by trained professionals is key for better outcomes. Mental illness in our community is an ever-growing crisis, and we need trained professionals available to respond to such issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6400. Let's try 6400.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Canson, and I have experience San Diego Police Department responding to mental health crises in our community and within my family. And I just want to say that it is dire that a person that approaches a mental health crisis is trained and understands and has compassion at the onslaught of a crisis. When approaching a mentally ill person, it's dire that they approach in a certain way, and the police are not the correct people to respond, because I believe they're not properly trained, and they may not have experienced similar experiences that cause them to have those certain attributes like empathy and compassion that's needed when dealing with a mental health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 2438. 2438.
Hi. Good afternoon, Board Chair Cox and County Supervisors. My name is Esmeralda Flores. I'm the Immigrant Rights and Binational Affairs Advocate at the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. All San Diegans deserve to live in communities that are safe, healthy, and thriving. Over-policing of Black and Brown communities do not make our communities safer. We need to drastically reduce the role, responsibilities, and presence of police in our communities. We need to divest from police budgets and deepen our investment of money and resources in community services and non-law enforcement interventions. We are encouraged to see the recommendations from Supervisor Fletcher to strengthen CURB, establish a mobile crisis response team, and create an office of race and equity. Police should not be first responders to mental health and homelessness or other calls better served by non-law enforcement responses. We have a couple of suggestions after reviewing the materials recently posted. Regarding MCRTs, we ask that guidance include direction for the CAO to work with impacted community members and mental health and substance use professionals to develop protocols for the system and training. We can expect an online enforcement approach if that is the lens through which the system is created. We also request that the CAO identify budgetary changes to fund the system by looking for ways to reduce the police budget to support this program. While it is encouraging to see the county consider this initiative, we know that there is much more that we can and should do. A Campaign Zero report analyzing data from the sheriff found that deputies stop Black people at higher rates in every area of their jurisdiction. The Coalition for Police Accountability and Transparency, which we are a member of, offers 5 policy changes that seek to reduce police presence and invest in community-driven solutions. The recommendations include passing a law that bans consent searches and pretext stops, as well as decriminalizing low-level offenses. It is important that the county respond to this moment with comprehensive policymaking and not a piecemeal approach. We ask you to support the items at hand with the changes we suggested. Additionally, we ask you to call on the sheriff to ban consent searches and end pretext stops. And finally, for this board to work with the community to take steps to decriminalize low-level offenses. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is 8392.
Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Suzanne Forbes-Beerling. I am a mental health professional, and I've lived in San Diego for over 30 years. Please consider approving this item, along with all the other items that are coming forward around social justice for African American people in San Diego County, Black and Brown people in San Diego County. Black lives are affected on a daily basis when interacting in our current mental health system, including emergency response teams. Over the years, the mental health emergency response pendulum has swung between models of criminalizing mental illness to models that incorporate a professional mental health provider working in tandem with police to intervene in a mental health crisis. Why are we still criminalizing Black people experiencing mental health crises? It is time to dive in to how race impedes the delivery of services to Black men, women, and children in this county. There is much data available to inform an understanding of the impediments so that we can problem solve and design culturally competent services for the Black community. One of the impediments in the delivery of services are longstanding stereotypes about the belief that Black people possess a greater ability to tolerate higher levels of pain. Longstanding stereotypes that Black women's mental illness experiences are attributed to the strong Black woman complex and thus minimized. Black people experience varying degrees of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Now, the strong Black woman archetype and the post-traumatic slave syndrome are not a part of the DSM. So how can clinicians treat? There is much to do and much to learn. In dealing with race and mental health, we're going to have to take the gloves off, get honest, get down to business. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9343.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher, for bringing this forward. This is long overdue. One of the things, I hope I'm understanding it correctly, that it actually will be available throughout the county, which means to me, including the 18 incorporated cities, so that it is not just the unincorporated areas of the county, which also will mean that we'll be able to use money out of sheriff's budgets, other agencies that are winding up using these services or having to perform these services, to be able to give back into the community. So this is sorely needed, and I really appreciate that you're bringing professionals into this on a much wider basis. Thank you again.
Thank you. And can you please confirm this is Michelle Krug for the record?
It is Michelle Krug. Sorry, I thought I said that.
Thanks, Michelle. Our next speaker is 9632.
My name is Savannah Ray. I've lived in San Diego County my entire life, and I am thankful that this is finally being brought to the table. I'm in strong favor of establishing and staffing countywide mobile crisis response teams with clinicians. I think this is a necessary step to protect those in our communities who need it the most. Police are not, nor should they be, trained to handle people in mental health crisis. Speaking from my own experience, I have had a woman come to my house clearly who needed help, and I didn't feel that I was in harm, but I had no one else to call but the police since I was alone at home with my baby, so I couldn't go try to help her. I'm not a trained professional, so this is a perfect example of how a mobile crisis response team would have been exactly who I could have called. So I really appreciate you guys taking this matter seriously. I think it's the first step, and there's much more follow-up that will need to happen. Please vote yes on agenda item 26. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9918.
Hi, yes, Michael McDonald, resident in District 4. I'm calling to voice my support for and urge the board to vote yes on item 26. This measure should prove to be a model that can be further supported and expanded on so that the Sheriff's Department can be defunded and funds reallocated to Black and Brown communities in San Diego. Calling for help really shouldn't be a death sentence to those who need it. We just remember Alfred Alongo and what happened to him. He should have had a licensed or at least a trained clinician or psychologist or professional who could have responded to that manner, and he would have been alive, possibly. So yes, I urge you all to vote yes on item 26. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8555.
Hi, my name is Chris from District 46, and I wanted to vote yes on item 26. I think it's important for us to establish and staff countywide a mobile crisis response team with clinicians, create a helpline for community to request a MCRT, launch an outreach campaign to educate community about MCRT, and dedicate $10 million annually in the HSA budget for countywide MCRT. This is something that a community-led organization can do that we do not need the police for. Thank you.
Thank you. And if our next speaker, 5755, would like to address the board on item 26, could you please state your full name for the record?
Hi, my name is Crystal Irving. Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. I'm a children's social worker with Child Welfare Services, and I fully support item 26, removing law enforcement from the county's response to mental health calls. Those with mental health issues are 16 times more likely to be killed during an encounter with law enforcement, and Black people with mental health issues are more likely to be incarcerated. This creates additional risk for Black members of the community. Too often when deputies respond to these calls, it ends in additional trauma, tragedy, and even death. And let me give some examples. Charles Kinsley, a Black mental health therapist in Florida who was tending to his 27-year-old patient with autism. He was laying flat on his back with both hands raised in the air, explaining his role in the situation, yet he was shot by a police officer. You may say, well, that was Florida. Well, let me bring it home to San Diego. Dennis Carolina was shot and killed by a police officer right here in San Diego during a mental health wellness check. Then Alfred Alongo, a refugee from Uganda who was shot several times while simultaneously being tased by police while they were responding to a psychiatric emergency. Mental health and wellness checks should not be a jail sentence, and it surely should not be a death sentence. This must stop. If we really want to talk about public safety, we know that having trained clinicians respond to mental health issues is the first step in addressing the issue and the dangerous situations it creates for those struggling with mental health issues. We demand that our county stop criminalizing mental health and treating it as a police matter. It's time to restore the mental health treatment that these individuals deserve and respond to these situations with mental health professionals who can begin to administer treatment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And finally, if 5976 would like to address the board on item 26, please state your full name for the record.
Yes, Bishop Cornelius Bowser, pastor of Charity Apostolic Church. And I'm urging all county board of supervisors to vote no on 26, 27, 28. Being a Black man myself and numerous encounters with the police, I can tell you for sure that this mobile crisis response will not address the issues that we're dealing with and why Black Lives Matter protests are out in the streets. When you look at the data, 9 in every 10 stops across all racial groups were initiated by the officers rather than initiated in response to calls for services. And police officers have bias in policing. That must be addressed first. Public trust must be addressed first. We must find a way to address and deal with the pretext stops to racial profiling. Police officers have no I should say the county has no authority to tell police to reform. Even if they say they agree to it, we don't know what's going to happen with that. And so what I'm asking for is that there be we go back to the table. Nathan Fletcher said he met with community members. He did not meet with me, did not reach out to me, and I endorsed him as a county board and supervisor. And he knows that I'm involved in police reform statewide. The people who endorsed it knows that this will not go anywhere when it comes to Black people. Black people are afraid to call the system for help. And when police come in, they view Black men as dangerous, as a threat, and as criminals. They will never give a fair shot with the mobile crisis response. And if we're addressing the protests in the streets with Black Lives Matter and so on, this is the wrong approach. And I guarantee you, we'll be back here again next year and the year after that and year after that until we get it. And we start dealing with how our communities are over-policed and being policed. Until we address that, we're going to continue to have a problem. So I really urge, my church is in Supervisor Cox district, and I live in Supervisor Jacob district. I urge you to vote no on all 26, 27, 28. They do not address criminal justice reform or police reform. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have a number of callers already on the line for items 27 and 28. When we get to those items, we'll call on you to speak at that time, but that concludes public testimony on item 26. Chairman Cox.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all the speakers that we've heard this afternoon on this item, and we'll go to board discussion at this time. Supervisor Fletcher, did you wish to make a motion?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Cox. I appreciate all the speakers in support. I would make a motion to approve the recommendations on this item.
I'll second it, and I have a couple of comments I wanted to make. First of all, I want to thank Supervisor Fletcher for laying out some of the recent history on this issue. It's not a new issue before this board. And also for putting some new life into getting these crisis response teams on the road. Our prior actions somehow, some way got stalled and the pilot is not in place. So I appreciate Supervisor Fletcher giving it a kick. I firmly believe, as I stated my State of the County address back in 2019, that strengthening the bridge between behavioral health services and the criminal justice system is a core initiative and a very important one. And at that time, what I laid out, we don't have a system of behavioral health. And there is a connection. I want to particularly acknowledge, as Supervisor Fletcher did, District Attorney Summer Steffen, because she held numerous meetings, she and her team, probably 200 stakeholders involved, spent a lot of time in putting together a very comprehensive approach to the initiative that was back in 2019. And that was initiated, by the way, Supervisor Gaspar, myself, District Attorney Summer Steffen, and Sheriff Bill Gore. So I want to thank them all for doing that. And then again, we're moving forward today, finally. Yeah, it's going to cost money. We don't know exactly how much money it's going to cost, but the cost of not doing this is much greater. And I think in some cases, though, there, like with the PERT team, there's going to have to be a law enforcement officer go along because the clinician may be fearful in going into a situation by themselves. So that's where the PERT teams come into play too. But it's really clear, these people that are experiencing mental health crisis, it's an extremely difficult position for anybody to be in or to address. And there may be times, as I said, where law enforcement is critical for protecting the safety of the individual, the public, and those that are involved in the response. We need to get this right. So this is just a piece, but a very important piece. And there also may be times when the situation can be better de-escalated without law enforcement. So we should have both options available in the region. And I think this will give this initiative a good kick. And I hope we can get it done sooner than later. So that's why I seconded the motion and strongly support it.
Thanks, Supervisor. Supervisor Gaspar, your hand is up. I don't know whether that was from the last item or you want to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to. Supervisor Fletcher is correct. This is not a new idea or proposal, and that's been reinforced, of course, by Supervisor Jacob as well. Please allow me to share a more robust history behind it in San Diego specifically. In October of 2018, as chairwoman of the Board of Supervisors, I initiated a countywide board conference to provide a comprehensive assessment of the state of psychiatric care in San Diego County. This conference kickstarted a collaborative effort between elected leaders, public safety, clinical leadership, and behavioral health providers. The board conference was an ideal forum for Sheriff Gore and District Attorney Summer Steffen to present to the board extensive work that their offices had begun in early 2017. I was pleased to learn that both the sheriff and the DA had led countywide efforts, bringing together stakeholders and experts to really map the intersection of mental health, homelessness, and criminal justice in order to improve systems of care for those individuals that come into contact with law enforcement and ultimately our criminal justice system. Subsequently, in March of 2019, then Chairwoman Jacob Sheriff Gore and DA Stephan and I brought forward a board letter entitled Strengthening the Bridge Between Behavioral Health Services and the Criminal Justice System. Several recommendations were unanimously adopted by this board at that time. Next, in June of 2019, staff came back in a response to these directions with a recommendation by the CAO to issue solicitations for community-based crisis stabilization services and non-law enforcement mobile crisis response teams. This board unanimously supported the expenditure of $13 million to support new mobile non-law enforcement response teams and the build out or leasing of sites to support individuals responding to in need of crisis stabilization. Well, after receiving this board's support again, the county pursued opportunities to pilot a mobile crisis response team in North County in conjunction with the build out of a crisis stabilization unit. North County was in critical need of these services, especially in light of the closure of behavioral health services in that region in particular. The county experienced several delays in implementation due to challenges citing the facility in collaboration with city councils. And prior to the pandemic response, the Oceanside Livewell Center expansion finally afforded the opportunity to move forward with the pilot program. So I was surprised to learn of the intended late docket item by Supervisor Fletcher by reading about it in the UT. Since Supervisor Fletcher supported all of these efforts, I'm perplexed why he would now be proposing what amounts to be a little more than a new title for the work that is already underway in thoughtful collaboration with all supervisorial offices at this point, clinicians, Sheriff Gore, and District Attorney Summer Stephan. Our DA, Sheriff, and staff created the blueprint for this work well over a year ago, and the work is being done. Changing the title of a board letter doesn't erase that fact. If it's simply the desire to move forward faster or more regionally, we could have had that conversation in a much more transparent way with a board letter that at the very least acknowledged the robust history, although I'm thankful that the supervisor covered some of that this morning or this afternoon in his comments. Like you, Supervisor Fletcher, I get frustrated by the speed of government at times, but this is a complicated matter and has involved careful coordination among staff, clinicians, and law enforcement. I support taking this program countywide. In fact, we all did already when we unanimously voted for the initial item a year ago. From that board letter, the initial service in North San Diego County will inform expansion of non-law enforcement mobile crisis teams, which would follow as service additions in other regions. If staff feels like they need an additional green light beyond the one the board approved a year ago, then so be it. But I don't appreciate the lack of acknowledgement of all of the work that has already gone into this. That effort gives context to the item today, and it's important. The last page in every board letter has a place to list previous relevant board actions, of which there are several: 7/24/2018, 10/30/2018, 12/11/2018, 3/26/2019, and 3/27/2019, which were left off the board letter and your comments entirely, as were the names of those who have been tirelessly supporting this effort, including Sheriff Bill Gore, Rachel Solov from the DA's office, Dr. Luke Bergman, Dr. Piedad Garcia, and me. The issue remains that the infrastructure to support this model does not exist today, which is why we intentionally designed a phased approach. We have been and continue to make targeted investments to build out that infrastructure. I remain supportive of the recommendation of county staff, clinical leadership, and law enforcement that this program continue so that we also have an opportunity to closely track the effectiveness, outcomes, and challenges before implementing countywide. I look forward to continuing this partnership and welcome Supervisor Fletcher's involvement. These are important conversations and policy decisions, and I appreciate the diversity of thought as we work to protect and empower our most vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of comments. I want to thank Supervisor Fletcher for bringing this item forward. There's 4 recommendations. The first one is to direct the CAO to take all necessary steps to accelerate the creation and implementation of what are being called mobile crisis response teams. I think that's important. We've talked a lot about it over the years. This is, I would imagine, going to be working hand in hand with the efforts to have crisis stabilization units in all areas of the county, at least all the supervisor districts. And I would just note that in the capital improvement needs assessment we just approved, that the crisis stabilization unit for District 2 and District 4 and District 1 are really put off until the fiscal 21-22. And I would think that that would be something that should be working in tandem with this whole effort to have the crisis mobilization response teams out in all parts of the county. Second recommendation is to obviously partner with local law enforcement. I'm not convinced that there needs to be a new phone number. I think that could be somewhat confusing, but I think that's something we need to leave to our chief administrative officer to work out and bring back, whether people call 911 and you have the training necessary for 911 operators to make a distinction between whether there is a threat to life or whether it's just somebody that is having an episode and it needs to be dealt with. So I don't know whether we encourage people to call 211 or we encourage people to call 911 and have them trained to make that assessment. So I would imagine that's something that would come back to us a little bit later as this is being fully implemented. And then its third recommendation is direct the CAO to create a helpline for the community to report non-violent behavioral health crises. That kind of goes right in line with what I was just talking about. Excuse me. And then finally, it's to direct the CAO to recommend changes to the budget to fully support and execute a phased implementation. I support that, but I do, in the fiscal impact, it references the fact that the annual cost is estimated to be $10 million. I'm not comfortable, and I realize that's not a part of the recommendations, but I think we need to give our staff, the chief administrative officer and the behavioral health director, Dr. Luke, the opportunity to come back. We just beefed up the number of PERT teams, psychiatric emergency response teams, to 70. If we have this type of approach, I'm not sure that we will need 70 PERT teams out on the streets. We may want to redeploy some of those. So in supporting this, I'm expecting that our chief administrative officer will come back with an implementation plan, a phased implementation plan that's being recommended. And we'll have an opportunity to have a better refinement in regards to how that's going to interplay with the PERT teams and what the right staffing and costs should be. And I assume that's really the intent of the motion on the floor. If I can ask for Supervisor Fletcher's concurrence.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other board supervisors that wish to discuss this item? If not, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Desmond's waving his hand there.
I'm sorry. Supervisor,
my hand
Chairman.
Up there. I had a question. There's some good elements to this here today, and I do have the similar questions about the dollar amount, and I do like the fact that the CAO will come back with a plan. But I'm just kind of curious because the initial plan was to have a pilot program up in North County at the Oceanside Crisis Stabilization Unit, which is potentially, I think we have the funding for that. It's going to be built next year, our finished building. So I just want to make sure that this doesn't undermine the effort of the pilot program in North County. So I guess I would ask the CAO to please, since that looks like it's going to be one of the first CSUs to potentially open up in the county, that along with the Vista one potentially, that we still carry out that pilot program effort, or make sure we have those efforts applied to that crisis stabilization unit when it does open.
Mr. Chairman, I had another comment I wanted to make. All of those recommendations that you mentioned, I agree wholeheartedly. The timing of this concerns me a little bit because it says in recommendation number 2, direct the chief administrative officer to return to the board within 90 days and then report back on A, B, C, D, E, F. But yet in 1, it's referring to the budget.
Supervisor, I think you're on item number 27.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm moving on. I'm moving on.
Well,
Sorry.
let's go ahead and vote on this one first.
Mr.
Okay.
Did
Mr.
you have
Chairman,
any other questions on this one, Supervisor?
Nope.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify for the record that with Supervisor Fletcher whether this motion includes his recommendation to have the district attorney involved in the development of the program.
It does. It does, to make sure the district attorney is involved in the development of this.
With that, Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Very good. We'll move on to item number 27, which again is brought forward by Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. The subject is fighting for communities of color, establishing an Office of Equity and Racial Justice. Supervisor Fletcher, do you have some introductory comments?
Chairman Cox, before Supervisor Fletcher begins his comments, I would like to ask any members of the public that have requested to speak on this item to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you. You will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recent events across America and certainly in San Diego have sparked difficult and much needed conversations around race and racism. We've all been forced to look introspectively and face challenges about the realities of race relationships in America. Structural racism is present in our society. We know during the Jim Crow era, our own government created policies to create advantages for white people while creating explicit disadvantages for Black people. These policies were repealed many, many years ago, but the spirit has carried far beyond that era. And we have not done a good job as a country addressing the historic inequities that remain present in our society today. Statistics on health outcomes, on housing stability, job opportunities, poverty, and incarceration show us the greatest disparity in all of these categories exists by race. Census data from 2019 report on income and poverty shows that Black people in the US have a higher than twice the rate of poverty than white people. Pew Research data shows us that Black people make up 33% of the prison population, but only account for 12% of the overall population. White people make up 64% of the nation's population, but only 33% of the prison population. Census Bureau is obtaining and updating real-time data garnered from households throughout the US during the COVID-19 pandemic. This data from the Household Pulse survey shows that people of color are disproportionately affected and negatively impacted in all areas, including delayed medical care, housing insecurity, food scarcity, and education inequity. Addressing these disparities through the lens of racial justice is the way we can begin to address systemic inequities. Racial inequities are present in all communities and some more than other, which is why we can't just take a one-size-all approach. There are clear differences between equity and equality. Equality is giving every person a one-size-fits-all approach when they may need more resource, services, or access. Equity is analyzing and evaluating the situation, community, or individuals and coming up with approaches that will address the most urgent needs in a manner that allows them to be able to have resources, services, and access without additional societal barriers put in front of them. And especially ensuring that race does not play a factor in the lack of access. Our communities throughout San Diego are crying out for the basic issue of fairness, to be treated fairly, and to have an equitable shot at a quality of life and achieving the American dream. Today, we want to establish a new Office of Equity and Policy and Budget Priorities, to secure funding and administer restorative justice program grants, to work to dismantle systematic barriers that present obstacles based on race, to ensure the involvement and participation of people of color in the contract source selection process, to create an outreach and engagement strategy targeting communities of color to ensure equitable application of not just county COVID recovery efforts and updates, but also other items, to collaborate with other similar agencies, organizations, and individuals doing this work throughout our region. It would seem appropriate that connect this board with the Human Relations Commission to show commitment to implementation of policies that address discrimination and intolerance and decrease hate crimes, bias, and human rights violations and commitment to the policies brought forward by the Human Relations Commission, and ensure an accessible relationship for those on the Human Relations Commission directly into the staff in this office. Centering the approach on race when looking at county government policies, budget delivers, contracting, and services will ensure that race is not a determining factor in opportunities of access, and that race does not present additional obstacles in accessing health, safety, and well-being for the residents of San Diego County. Establishing an Office of Equity and Racial Justice cannot solve all of the societal problems nor all of the disparities that exist, but it is, again, a step forward as a county. As we continue to plan our response to and recover from COVID, we want to continue to work with all of our residents to ensure our county is responding to each community appropriately, is genuinely listening and assessing and addressing their needs. Our county should and collaborate with organizations and agencies to ensure that trusted community organizations, that we can all work together for more equitable programs, services, and progress. The calls for change are not new. The reality is a spotlight has been shown on them. And today we have the opportunity as a county to take a step forward and take an action in establishing this office. Out of almost 18,000 county employees, it seems that a first step would be to approve this item to direct the creation of this office with 3. Now, I have heard a number of suggestions that perhaps it should be more robust than what we've proposed, and I'm certainly all for making things more robust. I also think that in the weeks we've been working on this, although we have done countless outreach to groups and organizations and entities, and I'm so thankful for all of them that gave input and feedback and are supporting it, the reality is we didn't have time to talk to everyone. And so there will be room to improve this Office of Equity and Racial Justice. I think that the Human Relations Commission will be a great platform to provide additional input and suggestions and guidance. I'm very interested in ideas around an equity fund that could be utilized, and I think those are all things that we can work together on as we move forward to figure out how we can meld them into what we're doing and how we can always enhance and work to get better. I also want to point out that the Human Relations Commission being linked to this office is very similar to how we do other commissions. The Child and Family Strengthening is linked to the Health and Human Services Agency. The Behavioral Health Advisory Board gives input to the Behavioral Health Services. Aging and Independent Services Board provides input to the AIS division. Social Service Advisory Board provides input to our self-sustaining program, and we could go on, but I think that this will be a complementary role where the two can really work together. So again, I think that this is an initial first step to direct the Chief Administrative Officer to recommend changes to the budget to establish this office, including 3 full-time employees, a director of the Office of Equity and Racial Justice, 2 community representatives, and additional staff support, and refer these changes to the budget for consideration, and then direct the Chief Administrative Officer to return to the board within 90 days and report back on the overall scope, roles, and responsibilities of the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. And we have outlined a number of things to be included in that report back in 90 days. So again, I think a positive step forward in establishing the office with an initial staffing. And then we have a lot of work to do, a lot of groups to listen to, a lot of things to consider, and certainly a lot of additional refinements that can be made, but we have the ability today to begin to move forward. And so I appreciate, again, the input we've received to date. Always appreciate more input on how we might make it better, but I'm hopeful that we can take a step forward. And with that, I would make a motion to approve the recommendations.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the recommendations. Is there a second to that motion? Why don't we go ahead and hear the testimony, and then we can come back to that discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second it for discussion purposes, but I do have some questions at the appropriate time.
Yeah, so do I. So why don't we go ahead and hear the testimony? It's my understanding for this particular item, we have about 20 some odd requests to speak, and I'll ask the clerk to go ahead and call those individuals up. Again, we ask you to please keep your comments within 2 minutes and try not to be repetitive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll also note for the record that we received 185 e-comments on this item. As a reminder for the callers, if you do not wish to speak on this item, please hang up and call back when the board begins discussion of the next item. We'll be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You'll hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the audio record, and you will have 2 minutes to address the board as the chairman indicated. You'll hear this sound when your time is up, so please conclude your comments at that time. I'd remind the public speakers they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. Erin, please identify the first caller.
Thank you. The first caller is 1116.
Hello?
Hi there, you may proceed.
Yes, my name is Jamil Cousins, and I am a volunteer coordinator with the People's Alliance for Justice. I am also an aerospace machinist, retired now, and work in advanced manufacturing. As far as where Mr. Fletcher's equity thing is concerned, I would vote no on that because it does not address the real problem in this area. Time and time again, even with the mayor who did a study in 2014. You have all these studies and you keep looking at the problem, but the problem never changes. And the disparate impact that this inequity is having on our community is being revealed by this current pandemic. I'm looking at your approach to it is just window dressing, because every time they come up with something, or you come up with something, or the others come up with something, you address the Black community. When it should be the industry and the manufacturers who should be addressed, because they're the ones who are discriminating in their hiring practices. I know that you have one quarter of your the GDP is from defense spending, and so therefore the oversight is on Congress. Well, if you address Congress and their oversight to ask what's going on or to investigate the discriminatory hiring practices, then you wouldn't have it. You have a workforce out there that you identified in October as being 340,000 people who are in advanced manufacturing, but less than half of 1% is Black. So you're talking about $55 billion where we only get $1 for every $100 that whites get on taxpayer dollars coming back. So if you're not addressing the industry and the manufacturers and Congress, then you also are falling way short of addressing this issue in this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 1508. Let's move on to 1593.
Hello?
1593. Hi.
Hi, my name is Jody White, and I am a resident in Impedes. I'm also one of the founding members of Impedes for Equality, and I'm calling in to support the proposal to start the Office for Equity and Racial Justice. I believe that there's too many white voices that are currently speaking and making important decisions that impact the life and future of Black families and communities, and those communities need several seats at the table. As a white woman living in Encinitas, where there is 0.8% Black population, we believe that those voices are the most marginalized, and the minorities need the largest platform to influence the future policy. I hope that you're committed to doing this work in our backyard as a citizen, and expect that our country Supervisor Gaspar do the same throughout the whole region. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 1508. Okay. 3354.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Beverly, and after reading both Supervisor Fletcher and Reverend Shane Harris' proposal, I find that both are just a start. However, Reverend Harris' proposal, to me, provides the best logic. Though I can appreciate the efforts of Supervisor Fletcher, the funding and staffing proposed by Supervisor Fletcher are inadequate and thus make his proposal for functionary as best and disappointing because the district he serves is most impacted. In addition, the Office of Racial Equity should have a greater degree of authority. But the Supervisor Fletcher proposal does not really give the Office of Racial Equity any real authority and often nothing new from a similar proposal written in the 1980s. As a retired county employee, I'm well aware that I was hired in 1988 because a group of African-American employees put forth a demand to force the county to hire more African-American social workers. It is unfortunate that we're still at that same situation in 2020. The county of San Diego has a history of discriminating against African-Americans. Since the 1990s, I have worked with the county on the issues of cultural competency, and I have repeatedly tried to get the county to address the issue of disproportionality as it relates to African-American children and family and child welfare services, only to really have it fall on deaf ears. Reverend Harris' proposal will provide a stronger platform to truly address the issue of racism in the county of San Diego and to bring about accountability, measurable and observable results. So now is the time for the county to make the Live Well philosophy work for all of its citizens. Otherwise, the issue of racism will again explode. I strongly support the establishment of an Office of Racial Equity. However, I would like for this proposal to have more teeth. So therefore, I strongly support Reverend Shane Harris' proposal and pray that each of you will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 3640.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Cox, board members, and CAO, Helen Robbins-Myers. My name is David Garcias. I'm the president of SEIU Local 221, and I'm proud to represent more than 10,000 county employees. We support an Office of Equity and Racial Justice. SEIU Local 221 continues to demand equity for working class communities, justice for victims of police violence, and an end to anti-Black racism in our institutions. We call for an end to the over-policing of Black and brown neighborhoods and underinvestment in critical public services. As frontline workers committed to serving the public, our members provide services for Black, white, brown, Asian, and Pacific Islander communities and families. The county must do its part to dismantle structural racism. The Office of Equity and Racial Justice is progress towards that goal. While this is a first step, we must keep the dialogue to improve and build on what we are starting. I speak in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 4025.
Hello, my name is Darwin Fishman, speaking on behalf of the Racial Justice Coalition, and we are in support of all three of these measures. Thank you for voting yes on the first one. Office of Equity and Racial Justice, we strongly support, and we think it's desperately needed in the San Diego County. And we also think that it's important to make this start and to get the structure in place. Then we can work on how to enhance it and improve it and see how it actually plays out when it's tackling structural racism in San Diego. Before giving it a failing grade, I want to see it in place and see how it works and give it an opportunity. We know how racist the county is, and we know how serious the problems are, and we're going to need many tools in our toolbox. This will just be one more, and we appreciate the city and the county taking these desperately needed measures. And it's very sad to see that it took the tragic incident of Floyd being killed in Minneapolis before these criminal justice issues were being taken seriously. We appreciate this effort and work now. And as a Black man that lives and works here in San Diego County, I am really looking for my county supervisors today to give me something to show that they care, to show that they're committed, especially given the racial dynamics of the supervisors and our constituents and our majority here in county that are people of color. We appreciate this work, and we're looking forward to your votes today in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 4081.
Hello, I want to start by saying thank you, Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, for bringing this much-needed conversation to light. My name is Joe Barrett, and I am in support of establishing an Office of Equity and Racial Justice. This would be a first step. Addressing issues of racial equity is not only an ethical obligation, it would be essential in addressing the systematic barriers that have disproportionately impacted historically disadvantaged communities and can form partnerships with communities to strengthen and promote equitable outcomes throughout county government. It will work to make government more fair and transparent for all residents. And I am asking the board to vote yes for this most needed change. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5033.
Hi there, my name is Nikia Ward. I'm calling as a resident from East County. I am a San Diego East County resident my entire life, born and raised. I was educated in the southeastern communities of San Diego, and I'm calling to oppose Supervisor Fletcher's racial equity plan, but I'm also calling to voice my support for Shane Harris's plan for the People's Alliance for Justice. I believe that we need to make radical changes in our city, and I believe that Mr. Harris's plan is a more actual and tangible plan in order to make that happen. I don't believe that we should be, for lack of better words, putting a Band-Aid on the issues that our city faces. I could tell you for hours and days on about my experiences being a Black woman raised, especially in East County, but I won't. But I definitely believe that Shane Harris's plan for racial equity in the office that he plans to his proposal is a better and more efficient and tangible way that our city could honor its Black and Brown residents and really tackle racial equity and not just to have something that's fluff. It needs to be something that's tangible, workable, and something that is really going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5192.
Hello, Board of Supervisors, Chair Cox and Supervisor Nathan Fletcher and the rest of the board. This is Shane Harris, the president and founder of the People's Alliance for Justice. We are representing well over 500 members just in the San Diego County region of the Alliance, as well as hundreds of members across the country. I'm reaching out in regard to this item number 27, Supervisor Fletcher. I want to thank you for just the idea of a countywide office of racial equity. However, I am opposed to this item as it currently stands. You late docketed this on Friday night. That is a poor way to distribute and galvanize communities of color to back this plan. I, however, in the rush of the night, completed and brought forth a better proposal that in fact addresses racial inequity in this county. The moment of George Floyd and the death of George Floyd is important. I was in Minneapolis to support the family of George Floyd. I came back with a plan. And this plan, I believe, is the more efficient one. Supervisor Fletcher, in your current proposal, you're asking for $1.1 million. The city of San Diego has passed a budget of $3.8 million for the Office of Racial Equity. Stark difference. You're asking for the Office of Racial Equity to provide oversight to the Human Relations Commission. Commissions aren't created to be overseen by government departments. However, commissions are created to oversee government departments. You did not say working contingency. You said oversight. That's incorrect. And all of the other recommendations that I have brought forth, I have asked for the direction of the CAO to bring this budget to the intention of dedicating at least a minimum of $5 million to the creation of an adequately staffed Office of Racial Equity. I am asking for the supervisors to vote no on this item today because I have asked for you to take all of these recommendations that we have brought forth in a very reasonable letter, and you are unwilling to do so. Therefore, I'm asking the supervisors to vote no. Let's bring this forth as San Diego County, united together to address real racial inequities. And let's move our region forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6687.
Good afternoon. My name is Drusilla Willis,
and I am a County of San Diego Employee Chapter President and a proud SEIU Local 221 Union member. I am here to support this agenda item. However, I have some concerns of the hiring process. The effort should be about creating value, engagement, unifying, and strengthening of the Black community within the County of San Diego and County of San Diego employees. As a County of San Diego employee, I have experienced and had employees share concerns of racial inequality. For example, an employee that wore her hair in a natural style was told the reason she didn't get a promotion was because she was too ethnic looking. And next time she wanted to promote, she should change her hairstyle. This was in the district attorney's office. The racial inequality is really obvious in the Health and Human Services Agency as well. I'm not sure how these employees will be chosen, but I have no confidence in our human resource officers. The hiring process within the County of San Diego HR is flawed. I have seen many employees that was deserving of promotions quickly dismissed because they are not seen as a yes person. I mean, really, how are white people going to choose who can be the employees for an ethnic and racial justice job? It won't be Black people because the HR director and assistant director are both white. Can you see the problem? It took a white man to come up with this request that has to be decided by 5 white people. When all of our efforts are put in place, we can begin to ease tensions, create hope, and improve our relations with our law enforcement and upper management within the County of San Diego. But I'm really not that confident in this being a fair hiring process with the Board of Supervisors change in November. An Office of Equity and Racial Justice is an important step to make sure that the county is outreaching to all communities and addressing the needs of all San Diego residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6747.
Hello. Yes, hello.
Hi there.
Hi, my name is Copper Evans, and I am an African American community leader here in San Diego. I oppose to item number 27. I support the idea of the County of San Diego having an Office of Racial Equality, but not Supervisor Fletcher's proposal. I am, however, supporting Shane Harris of the People Alliance for Justice proposal of an Office of Racial Equality. We do need a higher budget. We do need to look into who are we going to be staffing and hiring for this racial and ethics department. We also need to have a true sit down with all county leaders to meet with African American leaders to discuss moving forward with this racial office. I'm encouraging all of the supervisors to vote no and to rethink and consider what is going on with this office. And thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8188. Let's try 9725. 9275. 9275. Okay, how about 9827?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the honor. I am calling in opposition to item 27 by Nathan Fletcher, Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. As a business owner, an employee, a retired employee of the state of California, a resident, homeowner, and a 30-year advocate for social justice, I have actually advocated for social justice in the areas of housing, contracting, capital infusion, criminal justice, hiring, equal employment, and small business, just to name a few. I do support the ideal of the County of San Diego having an Office of Racial Equality, but I do not support Supervisor Fletcher's proposal. I am, however, in very strong support of Reverend Shane Harris of the People's Alliance for Justice's proposal, as I do believe that it is all inclusive. It adds all of the various areas that are relevant to the people of color's community. It addresses everything that I would like to see in a proposal, being one who has a birth certificate that identifies me as a Negro, living through the civil rights movement, seeing more of what didn't change than what did. I am strongly in support of what Reverend Shane Harris has to offer in his proposal, and thank you for the opportunity to voice that.
Ma'am, if you could please state your name for the audio record.
Lasagna Peisker, Peisker Enterprises, LLC.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6058.
Hello, this is Daniel Beeman. Sorry, it's taking me some time to get my phone down. Yes, I support having the Office of Equity and Racial Justice, and I suggest that you look at maybe having Steph Gross from the San Diego Human Relations Commission look into being involved in that office. Also, I support having maybe Shane Harris being looked at for someone in that office. And Omar Parsons. You can maybe take him right there from the county. I think there's a chance for us to make some change here. And I like what Mr. Harris has said, and maybe he needs to be involved in this and we can make the change. I do agree that we need a higher budget. This is the county. This is not just the city. This is the full county. Now, I told you about what happened to me on a 5150 the other week. And then 1 week later, somebody comes from San Marcos, IHOT North Team. Now, I'm in a building with many people of color. And I haven't seen this happen to those other people of color when they have distresses or other problems. So I'm wondering who's getting these contracts for helping out people. And I'm wondering why they have to come down all the way from San Marcos down here to help me when I live in south of 52 in central San Diego. I think it's time that we reach out. We have to reach out. If the county's going to be providing the money for these funds, for these organizations, these companies, they need to be here local in San Diego also. And we need to do this with people of color and small businesses of people of color. And I also recommend that Bishop Cornelius be looked at as one of the people that are on this Office of Equity and Racial Justice. He's been speaking out for years and years and years. So I think there's people here to fill that need. I think you need a higher budget, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8392.
Greetings, this is Dr. Suzanne Forbes-Bierling. I am a psychologist, and I've also had a lot of experience working with the county as a mental health therapist and also working on many system reform changes, San Diego wraparound, children's mental health reform, and the merger of substance abuse and adult mental health. This was a long time ago with Cecil Stepp. I'm also a part of the Racial Justice Coalition and the Black American Political Association of California. I am in full support of this measure. Please vote yes to pass it. Well, first I want to say, unpacking race and racialized experiences of Black San Diego County residents is an imperative. Black lives are affected on a daily basis, interacting in all of the systems that have already been mentioned, but inclusive of social services, employment, and public spaces. It's a long time now that we utilize data readily available to problem solve and bring Black lives to being included fully and equitably into the larger society. It should not be a crime to simply exist as a Black person. We should be able to walk around and enjoy the sunshine just like everyone else. I want to say that anyone in any of these positions, it's a wonderful proposal, and anyone in any of these positions needs to have experience in cultural competence in managing organizational systems. Whoever is in these positions needs to understand the concepts of intersectionality, white fragility, internalized self-hate, internalized self-revulsion, colorism, anti-Blackness, and all of the various other clinical experiences that are specific to Black people and also to white people and how they respond to it, so that any system change is not blind to those things that end up being germane to programmatic and systemic outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8555.
Hello, Council. My name is Chris Chow from San Diego County, and I do support the idea of having an office for racial equity, but Fletcher's plan is just not enough. And I strongly urge the board to support Shane Harris's plan. We are gonna need to implement a lot of tools to start to undo this systemic problem, the systemic racism. And Fletcher's plan alone is not going to be enough. So I oppose item 27 as it is, and I strongly urge the council support Reverend Shane Harris's plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9343.
Good afternoon again. This is Michelle Krug. I really, longtime resident of South Bay and longtime appreciator of Nathan Fletcher's leadership around the social justice issues. Thank you for this proposal. Again, it's a long time coming. As I appreciate my councilwoman, Monica Montgomery, taking the lead in the city, I really appreciate that this will be matched throughout the entire county. People really need a place to go that will actually have the ability to address these issues and make those changes and those policy suggestions. So again, thank you for your leadership, Supervisor Fletcher, and I encourage you to, the rest of the supervisors, to please vote yes on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 3461. I think you may be on mute on your end. 3461. We're going to come.
Hello?
Oh, here we go.
Hi, yes, this is Beverly Ward. I'm opposing item 27 in support of developing the racial equity in lines with Reverend Shane Harris, People of Alliance for Justice proposal. I read through it. I believe in it. I think we need to support looking for that. I believe also that we need to organize and have a commission that is going to analyze policies and procedures. I would like to do that with the proper amount of funding that needs to be placed in that. I also believe that we need more people, more FTEs as part of that as well. We definitely need to make sure that we have people of color and of our community that are involved, that can speak to racial inequalities, because we live it every single day. We are part of it. So who more to express that? I also believe that one of the persons on that committee should be Reverend Shane Harris. He has some great insight. He certainly has grown up in this community his whole life and has experienced many things as a young Black male, and has done a lot to support racial inequalities that we're facing in this county. So if we're going to move towards something like a racial equality, which I believe this county needs, I would hope that San Diego County would want to be the leader in this, something that other counties can look at and adapt. So we need to do it right, and we need to do it right first time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8188.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for hearing my call. My name is Jenna Rowe. I'm calling from District 3. I urge you to condemn and address structural racism that continues to seriously harm our Black community members. I urge you to establish this Office of Equity and Racial Justice that will promote communication and collaboration between government and community organizations on behalf of the citizens of San Diego, who are the most marginalized and oppressed. Equity must be a top priority for all San Diego lawmakers and citizens. Communities of color have suffered enough. It is time to make the change. I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8292.
Hello, my name is Vicki White. I'm a resident of Mission Hills and I believe District 4. And I am asking you today to support the Communities of Color Office of Equity and Racial Justice. San Diego County has not been any better than other areas of the country in terms of inflicting systemic racism on people of color. And I think we need to have a real reckoning on this. So I'm asking you today to support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we have a number of speakers. I'm going to call out the last four digits. And if you could please state your first and last name for the record. And if you'd like to address the board on item 27, you may proceed after I call out the last four digits. So we have 5723.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Cox and Board of Supervisors. My name is Dr. Susanna Flalo, and I'm a family physician and community advocate for equitable health care. I support the idea of the County of San Diego having an Office of Equity and Racial Justice. It is long overdue and definitely needed. I appreciate the current proposal put forward by Supervisor Fletcher, but it doesn't quite go far enough to address several important issues. I realize his current proposal will need some adjustments to make this a perfect proposal. Therefore, I oppose the proposal, item 27, in its current form. I am, however, supporting Shane Harris of the People's Alliance for Justice proposal for the Office of Equity and Racial Equity, which goes much further and addresses more concerns to make this a more functional office at the onset. It is more comprehensive and inclusive. His proposal has several recommendations that are reasonable and should be considered and incorporated. With the current climate we are in and the ongoing racial justice movement, we must strive to create a successful Office of Equity and Racial Justice to serve our community at the onset of its inception. So at this time, I do oppose the proposal for item 27 in its current form. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6510.
Hi, my name is Victor Brown. Victor Andre Brown. I greatly appreciate the work and effort done by Supervisor Fletcher in proposing the creation of the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. Thank you for your work, collaboration, working with the community in this way. We truly need more supervisors like you around the world. However, though I am indebted to you and appreciate the work, I do oppose the direct item 27 as I'm asking for just a little more time to review and increase the funding, productivity, and result of this much needed office. I also want to thank Supervisor Gaspar, and I agree with the statement that was shared with the public, in which Supervisor Gaspar shared her desire to see the county allocate more than the initially proposed $1.1 million to the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. I agree with her statement also that she supported the belief that it would be more appropriate to have the Human Relations Commission rather than the County Administration Officer shape the mission, vision, and scope of the work for the office. This important work will inevitably require more dedicated resources in order to implement meaningful policy changes. Again, I appreciate the work of Supervisor Fletcher, and if it was not for him, we would not be here today discussing this. I just simply asking if we can give him more funding, the amount currently proposed, and also add Shane Harris's plan and have the Human Relations Commission oversee the office. I believe we should include Shane Harris's suggestions. Yes, people of color, we can't wait for the extent of this work, but I believe it is better to wait a week or two and vote on a great and more effective proposal than to submit a decent or good proposal now if possible. Again, special thanks to Supervisor Fletcher and Supervisor Gaspar and to all the supervisors for considering this approval. It may seem small, but this office means the world of difference to many members of color in our communities. Let's make sure we make it as effective as possible, the best way we can, even if we have to take a little time. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9791.
Hello.
Hi there. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Abdul Rahim Hamid. I'm the National President of the Black Contractors Association, and I'm calling in to address the issue at hand. Basically, I'm in support of what the Reverend Shane Harris is proposing. I want to thank Nathan Fletcher for the initiative, but I also have to deal with the conflict of interest with hypocrisy that goes on with the supporting and pushing mandated government PLAs that are exclusive and damaging to the African American community, our contractors and our workers who have been failed by union initiatives that have basically promised opportunities. this is like a Jim Crow policy that I grew up in the early 50s that excludes and separates folks. So when you're talking about authoring a bill that's going to talk about racial equality and justice, you have to make sure that you're also living that truth by at least sitting down with the National Association of Black Contractors and our national members to find out about leaving no stone unturned to make sure that African Americans and women and people of color are not going to be excluded by large margins. So the new bill that's being pushed by Nathan Fletcher to remove the Measure A is hypocrisy when you're dealing with Black Lives Matter, when there's a known fact that these PLAs have been racially discriminatory in their nature. And so I'd like to talk more with him and his office about fixing things. I believe that the young man, Shane Harris, has some points. And I think Nathan is, and I congratulate you on your initiative and your well-intended purpose. But you have to basically look at what we're looking at in terms of what you're actually doing. On one hand, you're saying equality and opportunity. On the other hand, you're saying exclusion with an $8 billion San Diego Unified School District bond measure that have dwarfed opportunities for our apprenticeship program, which is the only African-American state-approved apprenticeship program that the late George Stevens funded, and along with Juan Vargas, to help African-Americans get a leg up. So I am not in support of the proposal as it stands. I think we do need more dialogue with reputable leaders in our community that have come to Nethian, and they are all honorable. But I think this is an industry that we need to talk about, getting quality jobs opportunities for African Americans. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5532.
Hello. Hello, my name is April Mahoney, and I am a podcaster here in San Diego, California. I've been a resident of San Diego, California for about 35 years, and I have not seen a lot of movement. I haven't seen a lot of progressiveness. I do commend Mr. Fletcher for his initiative, but I still think that he is looking at this with a helicopter view, where I, as a podcaster, and Mr. Shane Harris are on the ground, working with the community, hearing and feeling the pulse of our people. There needs to be more funding. There needs to be more of us at the table, making the decisions, the ones that have walked the walk, the ones that are talking the talk, the ones that are being subjected to all of this racial inequality. I have a lot of compassion for police officers, because when you call a police officer, you're not calling them for milk and cookies. You're calling them to bring the peace. And that's what we need to do. But we also need to have a dialogue, and we also need to be able to have the resources in our community that we can self-police, that we know who our neighbors are, that we can have a different type of neighborhood watch instead of investing our time and energy with always having to call the overseer. So with that said, I really appreciate your effort, Mr. Fletcher. However, I am in opposition of your current proposal. I think that it could go back and have some rework done, and I am in support of a lot of the suggestions and components that Mr. Shane Harris has brought to the table. I think that we can work together and find a happy medium. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6672.
Yes, hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Hi. Oh, thanks. Okay, good. Hi, my name is Dahlia Balmer. I'm actually in
Could you please state your name for us, and then you'll have 2 minutes to address the board?
Oh, yes. Hi, my name is Dahlia Balmer, and I am in District 3, Kristen Gaspar is, and I am complete support for Supervisor Nathan Fletcher's proposal. As a Black woman, I am aware that this has been something that has been worked on for years by the Racial Justice Coalition, which is a Black organization in San Diego. And so it just bothers me that several people have called in lack of support when we should be actually contributing to supporting this measure. Is it perfect? No, but nothing's perfect at the beginning. I agree with some of the comments about using data and actually having people who have the background and the knowledge, and not relying on those who have been part of the problem for several years in San Diego. As a transplant and very dedicated San Diego, and now after 17 years, I've learned a lot about the community here, and I advocate for us coming together as Black people, not separating. And even though something's not 100% perfect, we can make the change that we want. We can work with the county supervisors and define what that change is going to be. But to not support it, I don't think is acceptable. And I do want to say one thing. Kristen Gaspar has not been supportive of the Black community for as long as I've been living in San Diego. So any type of concern, I'm a little concerned at this day and age, that she's supporting this division with Shane versus the county supervisors proposal. We shouldn't be divided, and there shouldn't be that going on. And I think it's time for us to come together, support this initiative, make it what we need it to be, and move forward. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5820. Would you like to address the board?
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, my name is Mudita Tiwari, and I'm calling from San Diego Hindu American Association. And I would vote yes for Supervisor Fletcher's proposal for number 27 item for fighting for communities of color establishing an office of equality, equity, and racial justice. And I, as a minority, I could see that I should not say minority, honestly, because this is for everyone, whether it's white, black, brown, yellow, whichever color you can name. And we need such kind of establishment so that people have a place where we can go and talk about our issues, and people are there to address our points. And it's very important for us to have this. So I vote yes for it. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 1625.
Hello, my name is Andy McLeod of the Showing Up for Racial Justice North County Division. Surge North County is part of a national network that educates, organizes, and mobilizes white people to fight racism. We stand in allyship and in unity with the many racial justice organizations to ask you to make a careful consideration of Agenda Item 27 in establishing an Office of Equity and Racial Justice. This is a crucial step in progress on racial justice issues in California. And as much as we would like to get behind a simple action of affirming the step to adopt it, we would rather that the board take extra time, an extra week or an extra month, to put together a board, Office of Race and Equity, which would be fully funded in accordance with its size, which is much greater than the size of San Diego, which has a larger budget, which would have a larger budget if passed as proposed today, and which would have greater staff and would have more clout in directing future non-biased operations in the county and assessing and stopping the ones which currently have the poisonous bias, which has clouded our community for so long. We can't be considered America's finest city until we take care of all of our citizens. And this important item cannot be rushed. We will continue to pressure you to make a decision that gives this office the kind of powers and funding that is commensurate with its importance. Thank you.
Thank you. And final call for 1508.
Hi, this is Donna DeBerry, President and CEO of the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce. And as a former Chief Diversity Officer and a data scientist of 2 public traded companies, and I'm also a consultant that assisted and wrote the playbook for creating Office of Equity for other cities, I'm actually coming to you as a subject matter expert in this area. And I want to say, Supervisor Fletcher, I agree with your vision and your efforts, and I really want to support this proposal. I understand the need and the vision, the role, and the impact. And I support the idea of the Office of Equity. But I'm going to ask the supervisors, I'm going to recommend that you amend your motion and that you amend it to increase the funds to at least $5 million for this office or match the cities. I've never seen a budget that low, even at the start of it, especially for a county. I also need you to be inclusive of Shane Harris's plan. I did read his plan. It is comprehensive, and making sure from an inclusive standpoint that you have him either lead the committee that will be assisting in the job description. And the other thing I want to say is that as far as the job description is concerned, we need to make sure that you have the right skill sets and that it comes from the community with these cultural competencies and understanding of community challenges. And so I do support it 100%. But I also am recommending that you amend your motion to increase funds and to be inclusive of Shane Harris's plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 6075.
Yes, hi, my name is Laveda England. Thank you. So when we talk about systemic racism and the reform that is needed for racial equity, we are looking at an infrastructure that needs rebuilding from the inside out. For me, that means deliberately decompartmentalizing racism that has been accepted for way too long. So this is why I am in agreement with Shane Harris' proposal, which defines the primary mission that includes our community's firsthand experiences. We experience these things firsthand. We always are very resilient, but again, we are the firsthand experience, which requires no more input. Like if those of us that are not living in our community, they can make suggestions, but as far as how to move forward, because they're not experiencing it really from our point of view, they really don't have any input. So in order to move forward, we need to strictly implement some things. Whatever that looks like, it needs to be implemented. So with that being said, I am definitely in support of having an office of racial justice, yet I am I'm not in support the way that Supervisor Nathan Fletcher has brought it to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes public testimony on this item, Chairman Cox.
Very good. We appreciate everybody's comments on this item this afternoon, and I'll go back to Supervisor Fletcher if he has any additional comments he would like to make. Okay, maybe Supervisor Jacob, oh, here he is, okay.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate all the comments. And I know we'll get to board discussion. Just one point of clarification in the recommendations is just to have this office administer the duties and responsibilities of the Human Relations Commission by providing staff support and facilitation of related meetings, activities, and membership. So that's what's actually in the recommendation. I know there are demands for it to be bigger. I know some have expressed concerns about moving too rapidly and establishing it, that we'd rather study it or look at it, but not take any decisive action at this point. And so there's certainly a number of folks who don't want to adopt it today, and there's some folks who want it to be a larger budget than what it is. I think the opportunity in front of us is to establish the office, to adopt recommendation 1, which establishes this with 3 full-time employees, makes clear that this is a priority, this is something we're doing. Recommendation 2 directs the Chief Administrative Officer to return to the board within 90 days with a scope and outline about how this office will administer its role. It could include recommendations or suggestions for increasing its size or increasing its scope or doing more. But I think what we put forward today is a modest plan, but to establish the office. Let's get it up and running. Let's get it working. Let's begin the process of outlining the scope. Let's continue to work with communities. Let's continue to get feedback and input, get the Human Relations Commission established. But today is the opportunity to take a definitive step forward and saying, as a county, we are establishing an Office of Equity and Racial Justice, and we will staff it. and then we can always work to make it better as we move forward in the future. And so that is recommendations 1 and 2.
Supervisor Jacob, did you have any comments you want to make?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just had some questions about the timing. If the referral is the 1.1 million, and that's for the 3 staff, I'm not clear with that, but I was having a little bit of difficulty with. But basically, I know that our Chief Administrative Officer has done a lot on this whole issue of equity and justice, and I'd kind of like to know what we're already doing in the county, and then how we can expand on that. Because just a little bit of the discussion that I've had, that there's a lot being done, and I don't think the public knows that. And I have to say, as a white woman, I don't pretend to know all of the issues that are involved in the Black community, but I am here to listen and to learn and to act accordingly. But I'm not sure we should rush to judgment on this particular issue. On the other hand, I don't know that there's a harm in concept of supporting the office. But then number 2 would be, where the meat of this issue is, what is this office going to look like? And then perhaps what Helen could come back with is what we're already doing, and that could be folded into this so we have a more comprehensive approach. I like to always start with where we are now, and we haven't had that report yet. And my intent here is not to delay it, but to move forward in a very thoughtful way and take some time in doing that. I think what Supervisor Fletcher has laid out is a good start. But I also feel, and listening to the testimony, there's more work to be done. On the money side, I am concerned about the cost of establishing a new office. I've seen where that's taken us in the past. And you start something small and then it grows and grows and grows. Just throwing money and establishing a new office isn't necessarily going to change human behavior and make a difference in how we're dealing in our communities. It's to me, it's a person-to-person kind of a change that we're looking for. I think it could be a symbol and a signal that as a county we're doing something, but we have a Human Relations Commission too. And one of the things I like about the other thing I like about the proposal is there be a connection between the Human Relations Commission and this new office. So I guess at this point I'm kind of torn. On the one hand, I'd like to get this started, but I think we have more work to be done, as I indicated, and I want to know what we're already doing as a county. So that's kind of where I am. I'd like to hear what the others on the board have to say.
To maybe direct a question to our Chief Administrative Officer. My understanding in the budget that we'll be considering in August and taking action on the latter part of August, that there is some money that you have identified or set aside for dealing with this whole issue of not necessarily what was recommended here by Supervisor Fletcher, but certainly dealing with equity and racial justice related issues. I wonder if the CAO could respond to that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been working closely with our Chief Financial Officer, Tracy Sandoval, and we did identify $5 million that we have put into the proposed CAO budget. Now, you all have not seen that because we have not presented that. We're just closing the books on that and preparing all the documentation, and we will be publicizing our budget around the 20th of July, and then budget hearings begin in August. But in anticipation of trying to do some new things in this area with the Human Relations Commission, we did identify $5 million and set that aside for some direction from you all during the budget process.
Well, I want to thank you for that information. I want to commend Supervisor Fletcher for bringing this item forward. And I think we do need to have an office of equity and racial justice. I have no qualms with that whatsoever. But the concern I have, and the three items we're dealing with right now were all late docket items, and I understand they're all important issues, but at the same time, I think this is something that we shouldn't just immediately react to. I think there's an opportunity now with the Human Relations Commission we've just created. I think it would be great if what we could do is maybe refer this to the Human Relations Commission to help develop a mission statement. I don't look at this as a delaying tactic. I think that can be done in their first or second meeting. You could still bring it back for board's final consideration in conjunction with the budget. But it sounds like the money issue is going to be able to be addressed. For the life of me, I don't know whether 3 staff people or 5 staff people or 10 staff people. I don't know what the number is, but I think the idea has merit. It's something we ought to do. And what I would recommend, and I guess maybe I would make a substitute motion, is to go ahead and agree that we will create an Office of Equity and Racial Justice, refer this issue to the Human Relations Commission to develop a mission statement, and then have the Chief Administrative Officer bring it back for final board approval in the 90 days that was identified in the board letter. And again, I commend Supervisor Fletcher for this effort. I think probably what we should do with this is also provide funding for a consultant to work with the Human Relations Commission to help develop a mission statement that has broad experience in this whole area. And I would offer that as a substitute motion.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion?
And if I can make.
Go ahead.
I'll second your motion, Chair Cox, and I agree with you. I'm in favor, is one of the speakers had mentioned, the idea of the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. But today we just appointed people to the Human Relations Commission, and quite frankly, my appointments, I'm sure most of people's appointments to the commission have substantial experience in advocating for equity and justice for all the communities. And I'd like to hear what the Human Relations Commission and what their input is on the establishment of the department. And quite frankly, I have a hunch this Human Relations Commission is much more diverse than 5 white supervisors. So let's hear from them and see what they have to say and their input. And I like your idea of having more input. And Mr. Shane Harris's name was up a few times here today on his suggestions, and he's on that Human Relations Commission. If he can convince his colleagues to do things in certain, then fine. Let that group decide, the best way forward. So I'll second your motion.
Supervisor Gaspar, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Well, during my time in public office, I've pushed consistently to challenge the status quo, and critics have said that action today is unnecessary or that it's simply a knee-jerk reaction. But as Martin Luther King once said, the time is always right to do what is right. And I do think it's important to also do it the right way. And that's where I'll focus my comments this afternoon. Racial disproportionality and disparities are problems affecting children and families of color in the child welfare, juvenile justice, education, mental health, and healthcare systems. Disproportionality and disparities manifest themselves differently across these systems, yet they're present in each, and they share similar characteristics affecting outcomes, interventions, and policies. A complete review of disproportionality and disparities in social service systems is long overdue. In fact, a complete shift in how we deliver systems is long overdue. The typical government approach is waiting for people to hit a point of crisis before making investments needed. For years, I have promoted upstream work and investing in human potential. So much so, this has been the basis for my entire work portfolio. Investing in human potential is closely aligned, of course, with the Livewell Vision adopted by the board in 2010, proactively strengthening families and individuals in our community achieves that Livewell Vision by allowing all to live healthy, safe, and thriving lives. We have the opportunity to end generational poverty by increasing self-sufficiency and decreasing dependency on government. And in doing so, people are empowered to live healthy, safe, and thriving lives And there's also a significant cost savings realized. Our Livewell partnership has taught us a lot about how to best deliver services. It isn't through the development of another county program. It's through strategic investments in embedded, community-driven nonprofits and organizations that are passionate about their work and have built strong reputations in the communities they serve and are trusted as a result. If designed properly, an Office of Equity and coordination with the Human Relations Commission can take a much deeper dive into several systems: child welfare, juvenile justice, education, mental health, and healthcare systems, just to name a few. An Office of Equity has a unique opportunity to identify strategic investments to community-based organizations to build their capacity in order to better serve our communities. If we are to establish an Office of Equity, we need to strive for excellence. Rather than the board or the CAO shaping the mission, vision, and scope of work, it makes perfect sense to me that it should be guided by the recently seated community leaders on the Human Relations Commission, combined with an expert consultant. I've seen the list of appointees to the commission, and I'm impressed with both the experience and the wide-ranging skill sets being brought to the table. I can't think of a better inaugural task than the commission shaping the establishment of the Office of Equity. I think very highly of our CAO, and I commend her for all of her efforts, but I believe that this task is going to require technical expertise as well. This deeper work I've described will inevitably require more in the way of dedicated resources and likely more in the way of staffing than the proposal we have before us today. But I would argue that front-loading resources in this way will actually save money long-term. Think about it. If one person is strengthened and doesn't enter the justice system for 1 year, the county taxpayers save close to $70,000. I caution the board from allocating an even leaner budget from the city of San Diego, a much smaller jurisdiction, with different goals. The CAO, in conjunction with the Human Relations Commission and a consultant, should bring back to the board what it will take to make this office meaningful and justified. A consultant could also work with the CAO to bring back before the board, as suggested by Supervisor Jacob, an understanding of where we've been and where we need to go. And I think in light of the recommendations being proposed by Reverend Harris, the speakers today, and in light of the creation of the HRC, it's important that we move forward in a different fashion, maybe even since this board letter was penned. So it makes sense to me that we immediately direct the Chief Administrative Officer to work with a consultant that's well-versed in best practices pertaining to advancing racial equity, to convene diverse groups, to facilitate dialogue and solicit input from the community on the scope of work. And this needs to be brought back to the Human Relations Commission. In addition, the offerings in Supervisor Fletcher's board letter should go back. It sounds as though the things that he outlined in his board letter were things that came out of several community conversations. Bring those ideas back to the Human Relations Commission as well. The Human Relations Commission should have a lot to say about both the hiring of staff for the office, who we are hiring, as recommended by one of the callers today, Drusilla Willis. She recommended that commission actually weigh in on the hiring of staff. I think that's a great idea. I also think that the commission needs to weigh in on the number of FTEs that would be necessary to carry forward the meaningful work. That, of course, in collaboration with the CAO. I think all of this can be done in an efficient way. I'm hopeful to see it very soon. 120 days might be unreasonable based on the calendaring of things, but we should move forward efficiently in all of this. And then also, I think it's important that we clarify, and it sounds like clarification has been sought today, that the Office of Racial Equity is providing staff support to the HRC. It's not providing oversight authority. And I would personally like to see direct reporting back to the Board of Supervisors. We make appointments to over 132 different commissions, and rarely do I see any throughput of their work. I just don't have anything that lands on my desk. And I want to make sure that that's not the case if we establish something like this. So again, much work to be done. This work complements my work portfolio nicely. I think the path and how we move forward is the only level of disagreement within the board today. And I think it's most reasonable to move forward through the HRC. And I would like to ask the substitute motion maker if they would support engaging the consultant in this work as well.
That was certainly my intent, to authorize staff to hire a consultant to work with the Human Relations Commission and soliciting public input.
Thank you.
Supervisor Cox, quick question. So your motion then is to establish the Office of Equity and Race Relations?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And then work with the Human Relations Commission to work on the mission and the scope, and if they want to get a consultant, and then come back. So it is not dissimilar from what we did. We are establishing the office. As the author of the board letter that created the Human Relations Commission, I of course have great value in what they do, and so we're simply substituting Human Relations Commission for CAO in what we're doing. So establish the office, work with them on the mission, and bring it back. So as long as we are affirmatively establishing the office, then the process by which we work out the mechanism of the mission, I think is fine. If we want to go that way, I fully support that. We put tremendous effort in my office into creating the Human Relations Commission, and I think that that's fine. And then we can come back and adopt that. It's not in any way inconsistent with what we have in front of us today, this substituting in Human Relations Commission for CAO. So I support your effort.
Just to clarify, Supervisor, thank you for bringing this item forward. I think if we pass this motion, we are creating an Office of Equity and Racial Justice. We're going to ask the Human Relations Commission to weigh in on the mission statement. They can provide other recommendations. We're going to hire a consultant to work with them on creating that mission statement and involving some community input, and then it'll go back to the CAO. From that point, she'll have a chance to massage it and come back to the board with recommendations in the actual staffing. But the important thing is that the funding will already be there as a result of the CAO's inclusion of $5 million in the budget to support these efforts. So
yeah, I think that's great. That was been the intent from the beginning.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think we should give Supervisor Fletcher credit for opening up this discussion today. I think it's been a good discussion. We've had a lot of good public testimony, and I think what you are offering up makes a lot of sense. It certainly takes care of some of my concerns. I have only one question. I think we should put a date on when we expect this to come back. Otherwise, it's going to drag on and on. In my understanding, we're looking for a mission statement to come back to the board. So I don't know what's reasonable, but then we still have work to do.
Yeah, my hope is that the Human Relations Commission can start with this very quickly when they have their first meeting. I would think we could have a report back and maybe have the staff recommendation by September 15th. That's 90 days from now.
Okay.
And Chairman,
excuse me, could I just finish for a moment? What I mentioned earlier, could we also have the CAO come back then and provide us a presentation on what is already being done in the county in terms of equity and racial justice?
Absolutely. That can be a part of the report back.
Thank you.
And Chairman, I just wanted to make sure while we're giving credit where credit is due, I wanted to give credit to the many callers today, and certainly Reverend Shane Harris, who brought forward the idea to really engage the newly seated HRC. So thank you, Reverend Harris. Thank you to the callers and community leaders who've spoken out and made a proposal much better. Thanks.
Very good. I see no other requests to speak on this item, so I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one clarification, just so I make sure I'm clear? So when I come back in September, we will not have had a chance to have much time with a consultant, just the process of going out with an RFP and hiring a consultant. So we will continue to meet with the HRC as they get formed, and we will work with them on the mission and then bring that back. And hopefully at that time we would have a consultant, but I'm not sure we would have much consultant activity and involvement for that first report back in September. But we would be prepared to come back with Supervisor Jacobs' request on what we've done, where we are in the hiring of the consultant. Hopefully we'll have that person on board, and what we've done with the Human Relations Commission as it has been formed at that point in time.
Okay, that's understood. We would want to have a report on September 15th. Obviously, we want to move forward with this with due diligence, but we also want to do it right. So as long as we get a report back on where we are by September 15th.
Understand. And then you all would need to approve the 5 million as part of the budget process in August. In the interim, I will use some funding that I have in my own CAO's budget to get this thing started.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. Chairman Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Jacob?
Aye.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Chairman Cox, the motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
Very good. And again, Supervisor Fletcher, thank you for your work on this. At this point, I'm going to turn the last item, item 28, over to Supervisor Desmond because I do have an appointment that I have to run off to. So Supervisor Vice Chairman Desmond, please take over.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and appreciate it. Good luck with your appointment. The next item is item 28. This is increasing independence and strengthening oversight of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. This is also brought forward by Supervisor Fletcher. Would you like to make some opening comments?
Vice Chairman Desmond, before Supervisor Fletcher begins his comments, I would like to again ask any members of the public that have requested to speak on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that have been provided to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Item 28 relates to the third of my proposals for racial justice and law enforcement realignment policies for the County of San Diego. In ensuring the independence and expanded authority of civilian law enforcement oversight groups is critical to advancing the course of just and equitable policies. We all need to be held accountable in a way that provides a clear path to assess and always have oversight on our activities and our actions. San Diego County voters established the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, CLRB, in 1990 to provide independent investigation and oversight of the sheriff and probation departments. CLRB's authority extends to all county jails in the unincorporated areas and contract cities where sheriff deputies fulfill the role of local law enforcement. Under the current review board at the city, unlike the current review board at the city of San Diego, CLRB already has independent investigators and the ability to subpoena witnesses and evidence in its investigation. CLRB has the authority to investigate a wide variety of complaints related to county law enforcement, but is only allowed to review these actions if there's been a complaint submitted by the public. The only time CLRB is allowed to investigate without a public complaint is when a death occurs in custody or in connection with the actions of an officer. According to CLRB's 2018 annual report, the most recent available, CLRB logged 155 new complaints in 2018 and received 24 death cases. During that time, 102 cases were fully investigated and submitted to CLRB. 55 cases were procedurally closed because a signed complaint was not returned by the complainant. CLRB is made up of 11 voluntary board members nominated by the CAO and appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and is supported by 5 county staff, an executive officer, 3 investigators, and 1 administrative professional. CLRB has had its challenges in recent years. In 2017, 22 death cases were summarily dismissed because the investigations were not completed within the 1-year limit on the review. Over the years, CLRB has been understaffed and subject to budget reductions. In recent years, there's been a renewed emphasis on supporting and reforming CLRB, and staff has increased it from 1 investigator to the current 3. According to the 2018 CLRB annual report, no cases were dismissed as a result of the expiration of the 1-year timeline on investigations. This is a step. But again, as we've seen with all of the actions we're taking before us, we have to show an increased commitment to address the real concerns to ensure that citizens' oversight of law enforcement is independent, has oversight, and has the proper authority to do our job, their job. That is what our communities are demanding and insisting on, and that is what is appropriate. As a Marine who served in combat, I welcomed every oversight and investigation into what Marines were doing because I felt it provided the level of accountability and transparency that we needed to be subjected to ensure that we had the public trust and to ensure that if things were happening that shouldn't, there was accountability. And if there were tactics, training, or procedures that needed to change, that an independent set of eyes could make those recommendations. And I supported that actions now, and I support it here today. So what we are proposing, first, to ensure independence, we want to make changes to ensure CLRB is independent from the departments that it is tasked with overseeing. Although CLRB has its own office and staff, structurally, it is a part of the county's public safety group. CLRB should be fully independent from the public safety group that it oversees. And I'm proposing that instead it become a part of the county's finance and general government group. While applications to serve on CLRB are open to the public, the process from application to nomination by the CEO is an internal one. The application process to be a member of CLRB should be robust and more transparent to the public and should allow for community input. The community is being impacted most by the actions that are being taken, and so we should work to improve the transparency of our application process, involve more communities in making those opportunities available, and reform the way we go about that. Second, we want to increase oversight and expand authority. We cannot ask CLRB, which already works on a lean budget with an already high demand, to do more without also acknowledging that increases in responsibility could require an increase in resources. Therefore, we must make an increase of CLRB resource and staffing a budget priority. While CLRB presents policy recommendations to the Sheriff and Board of Supervisors by way of an annual report, CLRB should also make an annual presentation to the Board of Supervisors to summarize the activities from the year and present the policy recommendations along with context and explanations for those. And while CLRB has the authority to investigate all deaths related to county law enforcement, all other investigations must be initiated by a complaint. We should expand the role of CLRB to provide it with the authority to investigate other serious instances, regardless of whether a complaint has been filed. We have heard multiple occasions of individuals making a complaint, but then not being comfortable signing the form to see it through. And so there are many valid reasons why people may not want to come forward and make a complaint. Serious instances should be investigated if CLRB believes it's appropriate, not on the basis of whether there's a complaint or not. So we are proposing that CLRB should have the authority to investigate all incidences related to peace officers or custodial officers employed by the Sheriff's Department or probation where A, a firearm was discharged, B, the use of force resulted in serious bodily injury, or C, it was any use of force at a protest or other events protected by the First Amendment. Civilian oversight is critical when investigating wrongdoing by law enforcement. These proposals are a positive step forward that we can make. I would like to provide two clarifications on the board letter, both of which are consistent with our intent, but to further clarify. First, on item 5A, the authority to investigate any instances involving the discharge of a weapon should read discharge of a firearm. And so in my motion to adopt, I'm going to amend weapon to firearm. And then on 5D, I want to strike 5D. 5D was put in place to allow A, B, and C to exist. But in consultation with County Council, they said 5D is not needed, and it was creating needless confusion. What we are expanding the authority of CLRB to do without a complaint is simply items A, B, and C. And so I would amend the recommendations to make those two amendments, and with that, I would make a motion for approval.
All right, thank you, Supervisor, for bringing this item forward. Do we have any of the other supervisors have any questions or want to weigh in, discussion before we go to public speakers? No. All right, we have well, then, Madam Clerk, can we go to the speakers?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Desmond. I will note that we received 189 e-comments on this item. We'll be calling speakers by the last four digits of their phone number, and you'll hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the record, and you will have 2 minutes to address the board. You'll hear this sound when your time is up, so please conclude your comments at that time. And I would remind the public speakers they should mute their TV or live video feed before they begin speaking. Erin, please identify the first caller.
Thank you. Our first caller is 0706.
Hello, I'm Terry Best from District 4. Citizens' oversight of law enforcement is a moral imperative. We are poised to make real pathways to support people of color in their struggles for equality and equity. The least we can do is stop shooting bullets at them. This is a beleaguered community, and we're shooting at them in the form of racist police practices, police overreach, and a dismal lack of accountability. Please expand CLRB. Please defund the police. Black Lives Matter, and please do not vote for Kristen Gaspar. She's dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 2983.
And I'm a representative. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Could you please restate your name for the record?
Yes. My name is Lisa Vincent, and I'm a representative of Showing Up for Racial Justice, North County, San Diego. Surge North County stands in allyship and unity with the many racial justice organizations to ask you for a yes vote on agenda item number 28. Recent analysis of police data show clearly that racist policing unjustly targets, locks up, and even murders San Diego residents of color, the homeless, the mentally ill, and the LGBTQI community. Campaign Zero has given the San Diego County Sheriff's Department a scorecard rating of F. San Diego County Sheriff has the worst score of all 58 California Sheriff's Departments. We also request that the Community Law Enforcement Review Board, known as CLRB, be granted independent investigative powers. We go further and urge you to institute fully independent law enforcement oversight commission with separate investigative and subpoena powers with community members serving on this board. Above all, we urge you to fully fund these reforms. The budget vote for the county is coming up for your review in August. Our expectation is to see agenda item 28 pass and to be fully funded on the upcoming budget. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 3640.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Cox, board members, and CAO, Helen Robbins-Myers. My name is David Garcias. I am the president of SEIU Local 221, and I am proud to represent more than 10,000 county workers working on the front lines. We support strengthening the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, adding to its budget and independence. It's not enough to condemn the murder of George Floyd and too many others. We must address the systematic racism at the root. We call for an end to the over-policing of Black and Brown communities and underinvestment in critical public services. We must fight the dual pandemics of coronavirus and social injustice. We urge you to vote yes for this measure. I am speaking in favor of the motion, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5961.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors and CAO. My name is Iris Trammell, and I'm a human service specialist at the mighty Metro FRC. George Floyd, Tony McDade, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Sean Reed, Stephen DeMarco Taylor, Rakia Boyd, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray. These are a few of the names of Black Americans who were killed by law enforcement agents. Strengthening the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, adding to its budget and independence is the right thing to do. This will help us play a bigger role in ending police violence and fighting against Black racism in our institution. As someone who was born and raised in San Diego and has lived the majority of my life, I have seen racism firsthand. I have been pulled over numerous of times because the police thought at nighttime that I was a man due to my short hair. But then when they pulled me over, saw that I was a woman and that I was respectful, they let me go and drive home. It is time to stop the over-policing of Black and Brown neighborhoods and underinvestment in critical public service. Please vote yes on this board, on this review board, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6058.
Yes, thank you very much for bringing this up. It's very important that we have increased independence and strengthening of the oversight the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. For a long, long time, people of color have been treated differently. I don't know why. I thought we were America where people were free, but it sure doesn't seem that way. I've lived south of the 8 and north of the 8 now, and I've seen the difference. It's an amazing difference. And the citizens have a right to speak up and be looked at and counted in. We need to have this to help us change, to become better. My family lived in Minneapolis for 90 years. We built the Mary Tyler Moore mansion, which we owned. And because of another epidemic and economy in the 30s, we lost it. My neighborhood of Lake Street and all around there has changed so much, and not for the right way. We need real change for the right way here in San Diego. All people need to be counted. No matter what you look like, what you believe, who you are, and how you orientate yourself. We can make changes. We should make changes. Yes, we can, San Diego. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And can you please confirm your name for the record before you go?
Yes, my name is Daniel Beeman.
Thank you.
3897 Caminito Aguilar.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 8768.
Hello, yes, my name is Felipe Lazaro. I'm a San Diego resident for the majority of my life, and I'm calling to speak in favor of item 28. I think any system needs accountability in order to function properly, and that's something that has been missing from law enforcement for a really long time. I support this measure to increase the ability to investigate use of force by law enforcement, to increase independence from the county sheriff, and to involve community input and transparency at selecting members of this review board. Thank you very much for your time, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9343.
Hi, Michelle Cruz again. I really appreciate the three moving forward procedures for starting the process of dealing with our systemic racism and other ancillary issues that have the ability to be dealt with this. I appreciate strengthening the civilian board. I appreciate giving it more of the transparency. So again, thank you, Supervisor Fletcher, for bringing this forward, and I encourage everyone to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 5700.
Hi, my name is Wee Chung. I am Director Advocacy for the We the People San Diego. I'm calling in again on this item 28. In the time that when the entire country is advocating for more police reform, it is really for us to taking a step toward that and provide the independent and the strengthening the oversight for the Citizen Law Enforcement Review Board. I don't believe that any organization, including the law enforcement, should not go without without an unchecked power, not having any review or review of their police product. Their practice. And hopefully with this pass, we will have more tools to review the law enforcement practice and strengthen where we needed to, and provide them with some constructive criticism and feedback. That way they can be they can be better serving us. So with that, I urge the board of supervisors, please vote for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. And then did 6400 wish to address the board again on item 28? 6400, did you wish to address the board? If not, we will move on. How about 1593? It looks like you may be muted, 1593. It looks like you're still muted, so we'll give you a couple minutes to unmute and we'll go on to the next caller. How about 1625? 1625, did you wish to address the board? You also look like you may be muted, so if you'd like to unmute, we'll come back to you. How about 5723? 5723? No? Okay, let's try 1625 again. 1625? I think you're still muted, 1625. Nine three 9343. Let's try 5. I think we've now tried everyone a few times who was left on the call. If you still wanted to address the board, you can hit the raise your hand function on your phone if you'd like to address the board at this point, but I believe that concludes public testimony on this item. Thanks, Vice Chairman Desmond.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Let me know if somebody comes back. I realize there was no second to the motion. I'll go ahead and second the motion as Supervisor Fletcher amended the board letter. Do any of the other supervisors wish to make comments or weigh in?
I just wanted to make a comment. I know I had a conversation with Sheriff Gore a while back, and several years ago, CLRB actually came to Sheriff Gore and they said, hey, how can we better serve each other in this effort? And the sheriff had recommended at that time an increased number of investigators. And of course, as we increase the number of investigations on the CLRB side, there also needs to be support in the sheriff's office on his side. So resources really held the group back, but I do understand that the sheriff is supportive of increasing the investigators within CLRB. I guess my major concern that I'm having is what I'm hearing from CLRB members themselves who have contacted my office and have suggested that CLRB was not contacted as a board to weigh in on their recommendations. So I would have much preferred to have CLRB weigh in and let us know if these are their policy objectives as well, what support they need versus us deciding what they need. And so it does concern me, the limited involvement of CLRB in the recommendations themselves.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Jacob, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I had a question first, and then I have some comments I'd like to make. And this is to County Council. Do any of the recommendations require a charter amendment, ordinance amendment, or meet and confer?
Supervisor Jacob, they do not require charter amendments. They would require an ordinance amendment as noted in number 5, and those items would also be subject to meet and confer, which is why we say 60 days after the required process for approval of an ordinance, that would include the meet and confer process.
So it would be appropriate for the board to take action, and then the meet and confer would occur after that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I just want to make a couple of comments, just kind of overall, and because we're talking about law enforcement, I think it's appropriate. We're not Minneapolis, we're San Diego County, and we are different here. And I know that the Sheriff's Department has made some changes that others are just now talking about within San Diego County police departments and throughout the nation. It doesn't mean that we don't have more to be done. And I do support the action. I have believed that CLRB needs to have more funding and to do its job and to make sure that we have the accountability with it. But I want to make some comments about police officers, deputy sheriffs, and I feel compelled to do this. Just as it's wrong to generalize about other groups of Americans, I believe it's wrong to generalize about our men and women in law enforcement. There are bad cops out there for sure. And as I've heard several times recently, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. But so many in law enforcement are out there every day. I'd say we're talking 99%, maybe more. They're out there every day because they want to make our community a better place, a better, safer place for all residents. We ask a lot of law enforcement. We don't expect them to just protect and serve. Too often, as we spoke earlier, we also expect them in a crisis to act as mental health and behavioral health experts. And we're trying to get that off their backs. When arriving at an emergency or even a routine patrol stop, they must also assess every possible danger, like whether someone may be carrying a gun. And we need to acknowledge the complexity of their jobs and that they often have to make split-second decisions. And what isn't helpful is a split-second judgment of those that suit up and show up every shift. On every single shift. Too many make those quick judgments, and you don't know until you walk in their shoes. So many of our folks in law enforcement wear the uniform because they want to do right. So many put themselves in harm's way without hesitation. Can mistakes in judgment happen? Absolutely. Do bad actors exist in law enforcement? They do. And it is for this reason that we have oversight and monitoring in the department, along with an elected sheriff. We have internal affairs. Nobody's talked about that. And then we have CLRB. And CLRB definitely has experienced some challenges. And some of the recommendations, I think, today will hopefully help. I certainly support and appreciate Supervisor Fletcher bringing these changes before the board, and particularly the changes in item number 5 and then the clarification from council. So I applaud all of those deputy sheriffs, all of those police officers out there that do their job day in and day out. They risk their lives to save ours and to protect our community. And from me to you, thank you.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Fletcher. I just have a quick comment echoing Supervisor Jacobs' comments about the great job that our deputy sheriffs are doing. And if we want to continue to attract talented, young, diverse people to the law enforcement profession, the messaging that all cops are bad really has to change. But I do support, the reforms here in CLRB and appreciate Supervisor Fletcher for bringing this forward. Supervisor Fletcher, do you have any other words before we take a vote?
No, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I appreciate, again, all of the members of the community and everyone who's been engaged in crafting all 3 of these policies, and appreciate my colleagues' support. I think if we are successful in adopting this, we are taking a strong step forward as a county and sending a powerful message to the community that we've heard you and things are beginning to change. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Could we call the roll call vote, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Desmond. Supervisor Jacob?
Yes.
Supervisor Gaspar?
Aye.
Supervisor Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Desmond, that motion passes with all supervisors who are present voting aye.
All right, thank you very much. We do have an adjournment today by Supervisor Jacob, and then we have a closed session which we will go into after adjournment of this meeting. So Supervisor Jacob, with your adjournment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to adjourn this portion of our meeting in memory of Don Parent. After studying at San Diego State University, Don served as Public Affairs Manager for San Diego Gas and Electric from 1971 to 2016. He was an active participant in many local businesses and community organizations, and he served on the board of directors for the San Diego East County Chamber of Commerce and the Lakeside Chamber of Commerce, where he enjoyed being an announcer at their annual Western Days Parade. He was also a volunteer with St. Madeline Sophie's Center. Don is remembered by many as a great friend, a neighbor, and a colleague. He is survived by his longtime fiancée, Rhonda, and 2 sons, Colin and Evan. And I want to take a moment to thank Don and his family for his service, and he will be deeply missed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, you're the chair of some of my other meetings. I appreciate that, Supervisor Jacob. And all right, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting here today, and then we're going to move into closed session. So if we could all check into closed session in about 5 minutes, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
The board will now recess into closed session to consider those matters listed under item 29 on today's regular agenda and item 1 on the In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority. If there are any reportable actions, they will be reported out at the start of the planning and land use of this session tomorrow, Wednesday, June 24th, 2020.